40 days watching over her, fox woman stirred, whispered name sealed our romance. The Watcher in the Pines. The autumn wind carried whispers through the pines as Kian stepped out of the worn taxi, his leather satchel heavy with journals and regrets. The cottage stood modest and solitary at the forest's edge, exactly what he needed to escape the chaos of his shattered engagement. His ex-fiancée's betrayal still burned in his chest like hot coals, and these remote mountains promised the silence necessary to rebuild himself. 3 months should be enough, he muttered, unlocking the creaking door. What Kian didn't know was that his arrival hadn't gone unnoticed. Deep within the forest, where sunlight struggled to penetrate the canopy, Amora lifted her face toward the unfamiliar sounds: footsteps on gravel, the slam of a car door, a man's tired sigh. She had lived alone in her small wooden house for 7 years, her world painted in textures, temperatures, and the symphony of nature. From birth, darkness had been her only companion. But Amora possessed something others lacked, an extraordinary ability to sense emotions through sound. And when Kian first spoke aloud while unpacking, reading a letter from his mother, Amora heard something that made her heart clench: profound loneliness wrapped in forced optimism. That first day marked the beginning of her silent vigil. Each morning, she positioned herself at the forest's edge, hidden behind ancient oaks, listening to his routines. He woke early, made coffee, she could smell the rich aroma drifting through the trees, and then settled on his porch to write. His pen scratched against paper with desperate urgency, occasionally interrupted by heavy sighs or muttered curses at memories that haunted him. Amora found herself drawn to his voice. It carried a musicality despite its sadness, rising and falling with emotion as he read his writing aloud, testing phrases. She learned his patterns: morning writing sessions, afternoon walks that never ventured deep into the forest, evenings spent reading by lamplight while rain drummed on the roof. By the 10th day, she could identify his footsteps among all forest sounds. By the 20th, she knew his mood by how forcefully he chopped firewood. By the 30th, she whispered his name to herself, Kian, a word she'd heard him say during a phone call with his mother. "I'm fine, Mom." "Kian is handling everything just fine," he'd said, voice cracking slightly. She shouldn't care about a stranger. Yet something in his sorrow resonated with her own isolation, creating an invisible thread between them. Amora had spent years convincing herself that solitude was safety, that depending on no one meant never being abandoned. But listening to Kian's lonely existence mirrored back her own emptiness in ways that unsettled her. On the 40th day, everything changed. Dark clouds gathered with unusual aggression, and Amora sensed the coming storm in the air's electric charge and the anxious chittering of squirrels. She should have returned home, but something kept her rooted near Kian's cottage, an inexplicable worry tightening her chest. Thunder cracked like breaking bones. Then she heard it, Kian's door opening, his footsteps heading not toward shelter but into the forest. "Foolish man," she whispered, rising from her usual spot. "A storm like this could kill you." The whispered name. The storm descended with savage fury, transforming the peaceful forest into a chaos of wind and water. Kian had ventured out stupidly, chasing a notebook page torn from his grasp by a gust, unwilling to lose the poem he'd finally written without pain bleeding through every word. Now he was thoroughly lost, rain pelting his face, branches whipping at his clothes. "Damn it!" he shouted, foot catching on an exposed root. He crashed forward, his temple striking a low-hanging branch. Pain exploded behind his eyes as he crumpled to the muddy ground, consciousness wavering. Through the roar of rain, he heard footsteps approaching, swift, confident, impossibly sure despite the blinding downpour. Then hands touched his face, gentle fingers exploring the wound on his head with practiced care. "Kian," a woman's voice whispered, barely audible above the storm. "You're bleeding." He blinked through the rain, focusing on the figure kneeling beside him. She was younger than he'd expected for a mountain hermit, perhaps his age, with long dark hair plastered to her face and clothes that spoke of forest living. But what struck him most was how her eyes, beautiful but unfocused, didn't quite meet his own. "How do you know my name?" he managed, wincing as she pressed cloth against his wound. Amora froze. She'd spoken without thinking, 40 days of silent observation betraying her in a moment of crisis. "I heard you saying it. You talk to yourself sometimes." "You've been listening to me." confusion and alarm mixed in his voice. "We need to move. The storm is getting worse." She helped him stand with surprising strength, her touch both firm and careful. "Can you walk?" "Yes, but my house is closer than yours."
Come?
Kian had no choice but to trust her, stumbling through the darkness while she navigated with unnerving precision. She moved through the forest like water flowing downstream, never hesitating, one hand gripping his arm while the other occasionally reached out to touch tree trunks as reference points. "You can't see," he realized suddenly. "How are you doing this?" "I know these woods better than my own heartbeat," she replied simply. Her house appeared through the rain, small, weathered, but solid. Inside, warmth enveloped them from a fireplace that must have been burning before she left. Amora guided him to a chair, then moved with fluid confidence through her space, gathering supplies to clean his wound. Kian watched, mesmerized, as she worked entirely by touch. Her fingers traced his injury with delicate precision, cleaning away blood and dirt before applying a salve that smelled of herbs. Being this close, he noticed details: the curve of her neck, the concentration creasing her brow, the way her lips moved silently as if counting or measuring by some internal calculation. "You've been watching me for how long?" he asked quietly. Amora's hands stilled. 40 days. Since you arrived." "Why?" She pulled back, settling into a chair across from him. Firelight danced across her features, and Kian realized she was beautiful in an untamed way, like the forest itself had shaped her. "I heard sadness in your voice. It called to something in me. You listened because I sounded sad." "Loneliness recognizes loneliness," she said softly. "I know what it sounds like because I've lived with it for 7 years." The admission hung between them, more intimate than any physical touch. Kian studied this mysterious woman who'd appointed herself his silent guardian, who moved through darkness with grace he'd never possess in full light. "I'm Amora," she offered, a small smile touching her lips. "Since you already know, I've been somewhat intrusive." "Kian. But you knew that." He found himself smiling despite everything. "Thank you for saving me from my own stupidity. The storm will last hours. You should stay." Outside, wind howled like a living thing, but inside, something else stirred, a connection forming in the space between them, built on shared solitude and the strange intimacy of her whispered knowledge of his name. Learning to see without eyes. The storm raged through the night, and Kian woke on Amora's small sofa to find morning light filtering through simple curtains. She was already awake, moving through her kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing tea by measuring ingredients with her fingers and judging water temperature by sound. "You count everything," he observed, watching her tap the teapot exactly 4 times before pouring. Amora turned toward his voice, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "The world has patterns. I just learned to recognize them differently than you." That first morning became the first of many visits. Kian found himself drawn back to her forest home, initially under the pretense of thanking her properly, then because she fascinated him in ways he couldn't articulate. She was nothing like his ex-fiancée, who'd been all polished surfaces and carefully curated appearances. Amora was raw honesty, unafraid of silence or vulnerability. "Teach me," he asked one afternoon, 2 weeks after the storm, "how you experience the world." She tilted her head, considering. "Close your eyes." Kian obeyed, and immediately felt vulnerable in the darkness. "Now tell me what you hear," she instructed, moving closer. He could smell pine and wild herbs on her skin. Wind in the trees. A bird, no, 2 birds. Something rustling in the underbrush. Good. Now deeper. What does the wind tell you? He concentrated, awareness sharpening. It's cooler today than yesterday. Coming from the north. Yes, her voice held approval. And the rustling. Rabbit, maybe? Moving slowly, so not frightened. A doe, actually. Rabbits move in quicker bursts. Her hand touched his arm, fingers light as butterfly wings. Now, without looking, tell me about this room. With eyes closed, Kian tried to map the space through memory and sound. Fireplace to my left. Your chair near it. Shelf of jars behind me. I can smell dried herbs. Window facing east because morning light woke me. You're learning. Her fingers traced up his arm to his shoulder, a gesture that sent unexpected warmth through him. But you're still using visual memory. Try this. Forget what you've seen. Build the room from scratch using only now. She guided him to stand, then led him on an exploration of her home entirely through touch. His fingers traced rough-hewn walls, found the smooth river stones around the fireplace, discovered the careful organization of her shelves where everything had its precise place. How do you read? He asked, finding a shelf of books. I don't. These belong to my mother. But you could read to me. The suggestion held a tentative quality, as if she feared rejection. I'd like that. They fell into a routine. Kian would arrive in late afternoons, sometimes bringing bread from the village, always bringing his latest writing. He'd read to her while she prepared dinner, their conversations flowing easily from literature to philosophy to the small observations that make up a life. One evening, as autumn deepened toward winter, Amora taught him to cook without sight. Feel the heat rising from the pan, she instructed, standing behind him, her hands guiding his. When you sense it's ready, hear how the oil sounds when you add vegetables. Her body pressed against his back, arms wrapped around him to direct his movements. Kian's breath caught at the intimacy of it, the trust required to surrender control. When the vegetables hit the hot oil with a satisfying sizzle, Amora's laugh tickled his ear. Perfect, she murmured, but didn't step away. Kian turned in her arms, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how her face tilted up toward his though her eyes couldn't meet his gaze. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, before gently cupping her cheek. Can I? He began. Yes, she breathed. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, his lips barely brushing hers before returning with more certainty. Amora's hands slid up his chest to his shoulders, pulling him closer, and Kian understood suddenly that touch meant everything to her. This was how she truly saw him, through the texture of his shirt, the warmth of his skin, the way his heart hammered beneath her palm. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Amora smiled. I've wanted to do that since the storm. I've wanted to since you whispered my name in the rain, Kian admitted. They ate dinner with knees touching, hands finding excuses to brush against each other, the air between them charged with new awareness. As darkness fell, Kian didn't leave. Instead, they sat by the fire, Amora tucked against his side, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm while he read poetry in the flickering light. You see me better than anyone ever has, he said quietly, closing the book. Even though you can't see me at all. Amora's hand found his face, fingers mapping his features with tender attention, the line of his jaw, the arch of his brows, the curve of his lips. I see your kindness in how gently you move through my space. I see your intelligence in the questions you ask. I see your healing heart in how you've stopped sighing when you think you're alone. Kian caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Stay with me tonight. Just stay. She did, curled together on her sofa, learning the geography of each other through whispered conversations and careful touches, discovering that intimacy required no light at all. The confession under starlight. Winter arrived with gentle insistence, painting the forest in silver frost and hushed anticipation. Kian's 3-month stay had stretched into 4, then 5, with no mention of leaving. His cottage remained rented, but most nights found him in Amora's small house, their lives intertwining like roots beneath the earth. One clear December evening, Kian arrived with unusual nervousness, a blanket tucked under his arm and determination in his voice. Come with me, he said, taking Amora's hand. I want to show you something. She laughed softly. Show me? Have you forgotten? No, I've learned. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Trust me. He led her to a clearing he'd discovered, where the forest opened to reveal the sky in all its vastness. He'd prepared carefully, a thick blanket spread on ground he'd cleared of stones and branches, a thermos of hot tea, and a small fire burning safely within a ring of rocks. Lie down with me, he urged, guiding her to the blanket and settling beside her, pulling another blanket over them both against the cold. What am I supposed to experience? Amora asked, though she smiled, trusting his intention. The stars, Kian said simply. I'm going to paint them for you. He began describing the night sky with a poet's precision, transformed by months of learning her language. Directly above us, there's a river of light, thousands of stars so dense they blur together like spilled milk across black silk. Can you feel the firelight on your left cheek? That's where Orion stands, 3 bright stars in a perfect line forming his belt. Amora listened, her hand finding his beneath the blanket, fingers interweaving. To your right, where the cold wind touches your face, that's where the North Star holds steady. Everything else wheels around it through the night, but it remains constant. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. Like you've been for me. Kian. Let me finish, he turned onto his side, his free hand coming to rest on her waist. I need to tell you something. About why I came here, about what I was running from. Amora shifted to face him, their bodies close beneath the shared blanket. You don't have to. I do. Because you deserve the whole truth. He drew a steadying breath. I was engaged. Her name was Celeste. We'd been together 3 years, planning a wedding, building what I thought was a future. Then I discovered she'd been with someone else, my closest friend, actually. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It shattered my ability to trust anything I thought I knew. His voice roughened with old pain, and Amora's hand came up to touch his face, fingers gentle against his cheek. I came here to disappear, he continued. To stop feeling anything at all. I wanted isolation, silence, numbness. Instead, I found you. Kian. For 40 days, you watched over me. 40 days of silent protection, caring for a stranger because you recognized pain you understood. Do you know what that means to me? His forehead came to rest against hers. You saw my heart when I was trying to bury it. You heard my loneliness and offered companionship without asking anything in return. Amora's breath caught, emotions welling up that she'd kept carefully contained. I was selfish. I listened because your presence made my isolation feel less absolute. Because hearing you live your life reminded me I was still capable of connecting to another human being. There's nothing selfish about compassion. I fell in love with your voice before I ever touched your face, she confessed, the words tumbling out urgent and honest. Every morning for 40 days, I woke up wondering if you'd still be there, if you'd leave before I found the courage to approach you. When the storm came and you went into the forest, I was terrified. The thought of losing you, this person I didn't even know, it broke something open inside me. Kian's hand slid along her jaw, tilting her face up. I love you, Amora. Not despite your blindness or because of it, but because you taught me that seeing isn't the same as understanding. You perceive truth better than anyone I've known. You've shown me that the heart sees what the eyes miss. I love you, she whispered back. I love how you move through my world now with respect instead of pity. I love how you describe colors to me through temperature and texture. I love that you read to me like it's a privilege instead of a chore. Their kiss was different from all the others, deeper, more urgent, carrying the weight of confessions and promises. Kian pulled her closer, eliminating the small space between them, one hand cradling her head while the other traced the curve of her spine. Amora responded with equal hunger, her fingers threading through his hair, her body arching into his. Stay, she breathed against his mouth. Don't go back to your cottage tonight. Don't go back ever. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. This is home now. They made love under the stars she couldn't see but felt through his trembling hands and whispered descriptions. He told her she was beautiful in starlight, that her skin glowed like moonrise, and she believed him not because she could verify it but because his voice carried absolute truth. Afterward, wrapped together beneath both blankets, the fire burning low, Kian continued painting the sky with words while Amora mapped constellations across his chest with her fingertips. The future terrifies me, she admitted quietly. What if you wake up one day and realize you've trapped yourself with someone who can't share so many experiences? What if you realize you've trapped yourself with someone whose heart was so broken he almost forgot how to use it? Kian countered gently. We both carry fears, Amora. But I'd rather face them with you than face anything else without you. She turned her face into his neck, breathing him in, pine smoke and tea and something uniquely him. Then we face them together. Above them, stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, constant and indifferent. But here, in this clearing, two people who'd learned to see beyond sight held each other against the cold, building warmth from shared breath and intertwined limbs, and the revolutionary discovery that love required no vision at all, only the courage to trust what the heart already knew. A love beyond sight. Spring transformed the forest into a symphony of renewal, and with it came Kian's final decision. He stood in his cottage for the last time, packing the few possessions that mattered, preparing to surrender the lease he'd maintained more from habit than necessity. "You're certain?" His mother's voice crackled through the phone, concerned but supportive. "This is quite a change from your life before." "I've never been more certain of anything," Kian replied, folding the last of his clothes. "I'm not running away anymore, Mom. I'm running toward something real." He'd spent 6 months in these mountains, and the man leaving was unrecognizable from the one who'd arrived. That broken poet had been hollow, angry, unable to trust his own judgment. Now he stood whole, not because Amora had fixed him, she'd been clear that wasn't her responsibility, but because she'd shown him how to rebuild himself through a different lens. Moving his belongings to Amora's house took only one trip. She waited on the porch, a smile playing at her lips as she heard him approach. "Ready to be stuck with me permanently?" he asked, climbing the steps to kiss her. "I've been stuck with you since the storm," she teased, hands sliding around his waist. "This just makes it official." They'd spent the winter months preparing, expanding her small house with help from village craftsmen. Kian had learned basic carpentry, working alongside men who'd known Amora since childhood and initially regarded him with suspicion. But his dedication, both to the work and to her, had won them over. "You're good for her," old Henrik had said one afternoon, watching Kian measure boards with meticulous care. "First time in years she's let anyone close." "She's good for me," Kian had replied simply. "She saved my life." Now, settling into their expanded home, Kian established a routine that honored both their needs. Mornings he wrote while Amora tended her herb garden, but he read every finished piece aloud to her, valuing her insight above any editor's. She heard rhythms and emotions in his poetry that he hadn't consciously placed there, understanding his work through the musicality of language. Afternoons they spent together, walking the forest paths she knew intimately, him describing seasonal changes while she pointed out sounds and scents he'd otherwise miss. She taught him to identify birds by song, to predict weather through air pressure changes, to navigate by touch when necessary. "Close your eyes," she'd say, and he'd walk blindfolded through the woods, her voice guiding him, trust replacing sight. Evenings belonged to shared creation. Kian had discovered Amora possessed a gift for storytelling, her tales woven from memory and imagination in equal measure. He began transcribing her stories, his writing hand capturing her words while she paced and narrated, bringing to life characters and worlds she'd built in darkness. "We should publish these," he suggested one night, reading back a particularly beautiful passage. "Your stories deserve an audience beyond me." Amora had resisted initially, shy about sharing what felt deeply personal. But Kian persisted gently, believing in her talent with the same intensity she'd believed in his healing. Their first collaborative book emerged that summer, her stories, his poetry, intertwined to create something neither could have produced alone. The slim volume found its audience among those seeking authenticity in an increasingly artificial world, readers drawn to the honesty of their different perspectives merging into unified beauty. Success brought opportunities, readings in nearby cities, requests for more work, attention that could have pulled them apart. Instead, they navigated it together, Kian describing venues and audiences while Amora's presence beside him anchored every reading. "Tell them how we met," she'd whisper before each event, and he would. The storm, the whispered name, the 40 days of silent watching that became the foundation of extraordinary love. 1 year after Kian's arrival, they married in the forest clearing where he'd first confessed his love beneath stars. The ceremony was small, his family, a few village friends, Henrik officiating with gruff affection. Amora wore wildflowers in her hair, their scent more important than any visual splendor, and Kian described everything to her in whispered detail between vows. "You look like the forest itself blessed you," he murmured. "Sunlight through the leaves making patterns on your dress, flowers the exact color of new ferns." "And you?" she asked, hands framing his face. "I look like the luckiest man alive." Which requires no sight to verify. Their wedding night they spent in the same clearing, a tent erected for privacy, making love under the sky with the same intensity as that first time. But now familiarity enhanced rather than diminished passion, Kian knowing exactly how she liked to be touched, Amora reading his desires through breathing and heartbeat. "I want to remember every detail," he said afterward, both of them tangled together in blankets, pleasantly exhausted. "The way you smile right after you laugh. The sound you make when I kiss your neck. The texture of your hair between my fingers. I want to remember how your voice deepens when you're moved," she replied. "The way your hands shake slightly when you're nervous. The rhythm of your heart when you hold me close." They built a life of small perfections, mornings with coffee and poetry, afternoons in the garden or the forest, evenings by the fire with books and conversation. Kian's writing flourished, his work deepening with the emotional authenticity Amora had helped him rediscover. Her stories found devoted readers who appreciated perspectives that challenged conventional seeing. Sometimes Kian still thought about his old life, the broken engagement that had sent him fleeing to these mountains. But instead of bitterness, he felt gratitude. Celeste's betrayal had destroyed one future but cleared space for something infinitely better. A love built on truth rather than appearance, on depth rather than surface, on hearts that truly saw each other. "Do you ever regret it?" Amora asked one autumn evening, 2 years into their marriage, as they sat on their porch watching, or in her case, experiencing, the sunset. "Regret what?" "Choosing this life. Staying here with me instead of returning to the city, to ambition, to sight-based experiences." Kian pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Every choice involves sacrifice. I don't regret what I've gained just because I've let other things go. This life, this love, it's more real than anything I had before." "You've changed how I see myself," Amora admitted softly. "Before you, I thought my blindness defined me, limited me. You've shown me it's just one characteristic among many. You've helped me feel whole." "You were always whole," Kian corrected gently. "I just had the privilege of recognizing it." As darkness deepened, a transition Kian marked by fading light while Amora noted through cooling air and changing sounds, they remained on the porch, comfortable in silence. Inside, their home waited, filled with books in print and braille, with his writings and her stories, with the accumulated evidence of a life built on foundations stronger than sight. The fox woman and the broken poet, some villagers still called them, not understanding that both descriptions missed the point. They weren't defined by her blindness or his past pain. They were simply two people who'd learned that the most important things in life couldn't be seen with eyes. Love, trust, understanding, connection. These required only an open heart and the courage to believe that sometimes the best way to see clearly was to close your eyes and let your soul do the looking. Lessons from a love beyond sight. The heart perceives what eyes can never capture. True love sees with senses deeper than vision, finding beauty in voices, tenderness in touches, and truth in the vulnerability two souls share when they dare to trust beyond surface and appearance. Healing comes not from erasure of pain but from finding someone who honors your scars while showing you that broken pieces can create new patterns more beautiful than the original whole, that ending one story opens space for better chapters. Real intimacy is built not on what we see in each other but on what we choose to reveal, to trust, to share. It lives in whispered confessions under starlight, in patient teaching, in the daily choosing of presence over perfection. Love asks not that we see perfectly but that we see truly, looking past limitations to recognize the extraordinary in the ordinary, finding forever not despite our differences but enriched by the unique perspectives we bring to shared moments that become our life.